Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to our Stakeholder Advisory Committee meeting number 5. Welcome and thanks for taking time today to be with us. I think we're just going to step right into it, and I'm going to turn it over to Holly to start us off.
Yay. Thanks, Barry. Welcome, everybody. Great to see you. I'm honestly so excited about this meeting. This is like, I think a lot of us waiting to talk about facilities for a while. And so now we get to do that. And so let's get started. If everybody, just a reminder, when you come on, it looks like we got everybody just to change your names so that we can see who's here in the room. And Kathy, if you want to, look at like clockwork. I'm Holly O'Neill, if I didn't mention that already, and I've been your facilitator for the project. And here we go. I'm going to go through a couple of the housekeeping items. First, just to remind everybody where we are in the process. We're here to discuss facilities today. And then we're going to have we're assuming that today we're going to have more questions emerge than we will have time to address. So we're going to have an optional work session. We hope everybody can come, but that will be on September 29th. So if you can get that down on your calendar, I hope that can work for folks. Again, this is just assuming we know there's going to be more to talk about. So if you feel like you're able to squeeze that in, please do. And then we have 2 more sessions scheduled in October and November to actually look at the needs assessment and do some decision making really on our final recommendations. So we've done a lot of amazing work so far. Everybody's participation, and especially hats off to the task force for just holding all of these incredible conversations to help us really understand the data. So thanks everybody for that going the extra mile there. All right, next slide. Yeah, we've done all that. Did we go backwards? We might have gone backwards on the slide. There we go. Okay, so I just talked a little bit about where we are in the process. Barry will introduce our presenters. We'll have some presentations about the facilities, and then we'll do some group discussion. So the balance point here is just we have a lot of content to share, but we want to make sure that we also have time to talk about it. So some magic will occur. All right, next slide. This is, I want to ground everybody in the scope of the SAC. I don't know if you've been watching some of the emails that have been going back and forth from participants, but there's been this ongoing question about sort of the size and shape of what we're doing. And so I'm going to talk broadly to the core ideas. We are here as SAC members to be informed by our subject matter experts on the major needs and gaps within the criminal legal system. That one of our main goals here is to have a body of people, the SAC, who understands the issues. And so that's what we've been doing, is providing the content. The subject matter experts have been working so hard to try and first get the right information and then present it well to you. So that's what we've been doing. The second thing we've been working on is just this interface with the IPRTF to start to build on what's already been prioritized and think about those priorities and take them to the next step of really dialing in what's most important in our community and what are going to be the strategies that are going to fill those needs and gaps. So our next step is to prepare a report where we're going to present our findings and our recommendations to council. And then this lays out a foundation for a November 2023 ballot initiative that I think is hopefully going to represent a sense of unity from the SAC. It will be really encompassing, what we're going to do in terms of construction of facilities, as well as how we're going to meet the needs of especially, the behavioral health population. So we've talked about the fact that there are, of course, a lot of other things that are part of a whole system. If you think about it from a public health standpoint, there's a big system there that all contributes to our work, but we do have a scope. And I think we've, by and large, kept pretty clear on keeping that within our frame. The other element here is the public engagement plan. So, of course, I'm sure you've all been talking to your constituencies throughout the process, but realistically, we need to make sure we're doing some good outreach, especially to communities that are impacted by the criminal legal system, who may or may not have a voice in this process. So the VITA agency has developed a public engagement plan, and they're getting started on that. I think starting maybe even this week or next. And then they have about 3 months to really do some good outreach. And they'll be building on all the stuff that we've been working on with their messaging and gathering input. So that will be feeding that information back to you as we get it from them. So that's really exciting. The other thing I wanted to mention is going back to a piece of work we did, I think in our last session or earlier, is we started to try and develop what do we think are the major values and goals and vision that we as a group hold in common. So we did some initial conversations. We've done some survey results. We had really good response, so 26 responses in total with 38 folks, because we have 4 who share seats. And we did get some great feedback on that. It was a lot of feedback. So here's what we need to do next. Next slide. That we got this, when you look at the survey results, there is actually a lot of agreement in this group, even though we do represent a fairly diverse set of perspectives, I would say, and professional backgrounds. There is a lot of agreement on this. We have some more work. I don't want to overstate it. We have some more work to do. And Marty and I are hoping that some of you might like to help with that. So if you would be game to work with us on crafting, looking at all the feedback and crafting the final statements, that would be really terrific. And so imagine a meeting or two, and you'd have fun because you'd get to hang out with us and work on these statements, do wordsmithing if that's your jam. So yeah, please email the SAC at, here's the address, you can read it yourself. And then our goal is to have that prepped by the October 13th meeting. So I do hope folks will be interested in joining in on getting these statements cleaned up. All right, next slide. Wonderful. Okay, we're on. That was the preamble. And I'm so excited now to, Barry, do you want to introduce Caleb and get us started?
Yeah, thanks, Holly. We have 2 basic chunks today to today's kind of presentation around facilities, and that's Lieutenant Erickson, our corrections officer, is going to be leading us through discussion and kind of so we know a little bit more about the usage of the jail and some of the best practices that can be going into the design of a new facility. The other thing we're going to talk about is we have gotten our results back from our inmate survey that we did in the facility. So we're going to be talking about that. And just so you know, there's a second piece to that survey, and that is the staff. And that survey is underway now. So David is working on that. We hope to get some results back, within the next few weeks or so. So without any further ado, I will introduce to you Lieutenant Caleb Erickson from the Corrections Department.
Thank you, Barry. I appreciate the introduction. And for those of you who have seen me before, I want to say that we gathered some information anticipating this presentation today, but this may not be the complete picture that you're looking for. And if that's the case, feel free to let us know. We hope that this is the information that you wanted to know. But again, this can be the beginning of a discussion rather than the end of it. So we're going to talk first about the 2 facilities that exist, some of the pros and cons of each, the construction, the layout, some of the functionality. So the downtown facility, which is the building that I'm in right now, was designed in the early 80s, opened in 1984. It was built in a time where common practices were that you built largely linear design facilities, meaning it's a long and narrow facility. It is essentially built that way because that's the way the shape of the property is. It also goes up 3 floors, so 3 floors stacked on each other. And it has 28 separate units for 148 inmate beds. We've gone through a number of reconstruction efforts over the years, and that'll come up on the next slide, but it is essentially built for all classifications of inmates. So we can house everybody who comes in contact with the criminal justice system, all the way from low-level misdemeanors all the way up to maximum custody inmates. So next slide, please. As I mentioned before, there have been a couple of remodels, some significant changes in the functions of some of our units started in the early 2000s, where they changed what was the trustee tank or the inmate worker tank into a break room, locker room area. The booking was reconfigured to change where the property was stored. The property room became a storage room for supplies. A number of office spaces were either created, remodeled, or removed. And so things shifted around, changing functionality for a lot of space. The courtroom that is existing today used to be more classroom space. So we could talk about that for a long time, but just a lot of the functionality was changed to accommodate different needs. And in 2013, all of the electronics in the entire building were replaced. The changes in technology that have taken place over the past years, as you are probably well aware, mean that the technology that's in place now is already obsolete. And then we did a retrofit beginning in early 2020 or late 2019, actually, where we replaced almost all of the security doors and locks. And that included some integration with the existing electronics. So a lot of stuff has been changed to accommodate some of the needs. And you will also be aware, probably peripherally, that the elevator system, which is the primary way to get from floor to floor, is unreliable and has had many challenges over the past year. And so the Interim Work Center, which was built in 2006 and originally designed in 2004, 2005, is a tilt-up steel construction building that is a commercial style construction. It was intended to be a temporary facility. So you'll see a lot of use of sheetrock within the building where it doesn't have hardened materials that would be typical in a jail setting. The intention was originally to be used for all fully sentenced misdemeanor only or low-level offenders. And rapidly, we did not have the population that we needed to make that particular assignment happen. So we started adding in essentially low-level misdemeanor or low-level classifications, and have increased that over time to include some low-medium, what we call low-medium classification inmates. So it is also the center of operations for all sentencing alternatives through the sheriff's office. So we'll talk a little bit more about each of those in detail on a future slide. So the downtown facility has some pros. It has given us the only opportunity that we have for higher classification inmates because of its hardened nature. When we have people who have behavior issues or higher classification, it is the only housing that we have for those folks. So that is one significant pro. The cons are rather lengthy, and I didn't even get to all of them, but some of the main ones are really all functional systems are in disrepair. So everything from the obsolete electronics to the crumbling walls and other facades and things like that. Every piece of infrastructure really needs to be either replaced or gone through. The elevators are going to become a priority here. at the end of this year, early next year for the county to replace. There's very little natural light, and the areas that do have natural light are very, very small amounts. Again, I mentioned the linear design. What linear design means is that you really have a challenge seeing and or interacting with inmates from wherever you're standing. It doesn't matter if you're standing right in front of a large unit. They don't have access to see you, and you don't have access to see them oftentimes. So that is the major challenge in the linear design. The next bullet point is really about bringing the inmates to the services is the design of the facility. What I mean by that is if somebody needs a service, you have to take them out of their housing unit and you have to bring them to wherever that service is, be that recreation, attorney visits, court, medical, dental, any functions at all other than eating are done outside of the unit. And so it's extremely staff intensive, and it is necessarily less safe when you're bringing people out of their housing unit and putting them in an area in a separate part of the building. We also have multiple floors, as I mentioned before. And so failing infrastructure and unreliable elevators means that having multiple floors is often one of the largest challenges that we have. Because you can't get to some places at times, which is definitely a big minus. Next slide, please. So for the work center, it is relatively newer construction. So some of the functions at the work center being newer than the downtown facility are just simply newer. It is all on one floor. Some of the systems like the electronics on the doors are beginning to fail. Again, we have a design where we were reliant on bringing the inmates to the services. And that is really a function of not really intended to be in the facility as long as we have been. So we're not using it as it was designed. We designed it again to be minimum security, all sentenced people and as many people as possible out doing work and work release and things like that. There's limited programming space in the design of the facility. And that has been essentially converted to courtroom space because we needed to have access to the courts at that building at the advent of COVID. So that's just some of the cons for the work center. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk specifically about data on the next batch of slides. And so what you're looking at here is the yearly average of all inmates in custody. And so these data are available in this presentation and you can refer back to them. I have a number of charts and graphs and reports that we will not have time to go over all of them in detail, but I want you to have a general sense that we're right at about where we were in 2017 in terms of overall averages. In 2022 so far. You saw that dip in the middle of your screen now that represented the early days of COVID when we had extremely tough booking restrictions. And the booking restrictions are still in place today, but we've seen a fairly large shift in the population in terms of it going up. I mentioned before, I believe, that we're right at 35 to 40% increase in population over last year, even though we've got more restrictions in place today. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of overall average daily population. That's what ADP stands for, going back to the late 80s. And you can see different things that have impacted the population over the years. And so when you look at the spikes, there were things happening at the state level with DOC and reformations for sentencing that caused a lot of inmates that flooded out of DOC to be booked into our local jurisdictions. And that happened at the early 90s. And then in various other stages, we've seen increases in certain crimes. The work center opened, and just prior to the work center opening, we had booking restrictions that meant that there were tens of thousands of backlog warrants. We weren't booking anything that wasn't an absolute priority, similar to exactly what's going on right now. When the work center opened, we experienced a rapid increase almost overnight in terms of the population, and that stayed relatively high. It started to decline. We had a number of factors for that. Blake decision had some impact on our population because of decriminalization of some of the substance use laws. And then the Blake fix also had some impact in the opposite direction. And we see our biggest decline since, as we talked about on the previous slide, at the advent of COVID. And then we're back up again to over capacity for combined facilities. And again, these slides are all going to be available in future, so you'll be able to refer back to them. But I wanted to kind of highlight some of the things that were really impactful in terms of the overall population over the years. Next slide, please. So this is broken down by facility. So this green bar is downtown and the blue bar is the work center. And so you can see the breakout of the facilities. The data is missing, but the one on the far right is this year, and then it just goes back annually sequentially. Next slide, please. So this one's kind of complicated, and I know it's a lot to look at. But what I wanted to try and capture was the number of days that people are here on average, and this is over 8 years. So if you look at the top lines that reach into the 2,500 and over, that's the number of people who are here for 1 day or less. And then it goes up from there in increments: 2 days, 2 to 3 days, 8 to 14 days, 6 to 120, 21 to 300, and then over a year. And so you'll see the massive jump here, or the larger numbers are 1 day. And so we get a lot of people who are here than, say, less than 2 weeks. And then it goes off down in slope as you get to longer periods of time. And usually the folks who are here for longer periods of time are pretrial felons on fairly serious charges. And so they end up being here pretrial for a longer period of time. Next slide, please.
I just want to interrupt for 1 second and say, I'm sorry. I noticed that the dates got cut. That's my fault. But that was from 2017 to 22 on that previous slide, and we'll get those fixed. I'm sorry about that. So the left hand is 2017, and every spike is another year to 2022.
Yeah, and it may be that if that information is important to everybody, I've got each year broken down as well. I did the summary slide for the sake of time, but I've got each year broken down so you can see more detail on each year as well. So this one is the most commonly occurring offenses in 2022. So if you're looking at this list and you're wondering why things like theft third, which is essentially shoplifting, misdemeanor level malicious mischief, and driving while license suspended third even show up on this list, we end up in a situation where if somebody is booked for a DUI and they also have a driving license suspended associated with it, they get those 2 additional charges, or that additional charge added at the same time. And so we don't book anybody for just theft third, just driving license suspended third. And so the only time you'll see those is in concurrence with another charge, but it happens quite frequently that they're booked together. And the malicious mischief thirds, the assault fourths, those do not have a descriptor here, but the assumption here is this is our assault fourth domestic violence. And really anything that's in a harassment, assaults, they're generally assault domestic violence. And the same thing with the FTA. FTA stands for failed to appear. So if they fail to appear for a hearing or comply with some form of pretrial order, then a warrant was issued for their arrest. And again, those are all going to be domestic violence. So I've got these data as well going back a number of years, so we can look at that in another format as well. This one is pretty telling, and this is real recent that this has been a change, but with the advent of COVID and the difficulty getting things through court, and I may have mentioned this before, but somewhere less than 2% of all people in our custody on a given day are fully sentenced on their matters. So even if they have multiple offenses that they're being held on. So less than 2% is a staggering amount. And that means that we have here people here longer than they used to be here. And it puts out the average length of stay, which we've talked about, I think, in previous settings. So it is a challenge to find room for people when we can't really find anybody who is sentenced and moving out, either moving on to DOC or released time served, because they're very often not sentenced. And the other burden that this puts on, and you can keep it slow, so that's fine, but the other burden that it puts on is if we have sentencing alternatives, but people never actually get to those sentencing alternatives, it's driving down the utilization of those sentencing alternatives. And we'll cover that in a future slide as well. So next slide, please. So the reason for these increases in population, I alluded to some of these things as well. Having a backlog through the court systems, DOC having limited access to offenders to do what is known as pre-sentence investigation, which happens on all convictions for sex offenses. Defense attorneys and prosecutors having difficulty meeting with each other and or public defenders meeting with their clients to resolve cases, has increased the length of the stay overall, meaning that the population is driven up. And it's not just one thing, right? We can point to the Sentence Reformation Act in terms of a massive spike in the early 90s, but there are a number of things that contribute to this increase in population at this time. And so it's not just one button that we push, one knob that we twist to fix it. So the Blake decision decreased population, and then the Blake fix has increased bookings. And so we've got some relaxed COVID restrictions along at the same time. You know, we started out very, very stringent on who we would book in the early 2020, March of 2020, we were very, very stringent on who we would book. And because we had everybody who would come into the facility would have a 14-day isolation period in order to make sure that they were free of COVID before they could essentially move about the facility. And we've relaxed all of that movement restriction and the isolation restriction. And so we've had a commensurate level of restriction change. So sort of over the years, it's been more relaxed in terms of the level of booking restrictions that have been in place. We've also seen a large contingent of people, somewhere on the order of 20% of the people who are booking, we've never seen in our area before. They may be from other areas of the state, and maybe be areas of the nation that they're coming from, and they're coming to us, and they've already been involved in the criminal justice system elsewhere, but they're new to us and new to our system. And so that when we look at their criminal history, we'll see that they have been involved in other places, but they're new to us. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about some diversion strategies, because it's not all bad news, I guess is what I'm trying to say. We are currently doing a number of things that are keeping our population lower than it has been over the years. And the reason it is as low as it is right now is because of these efforts. Some of these things are not sustainable long-term. And what I mean by that is we cannot continue to do these exact same things if there was a fix for jail space, for example. We wouldn't continue in this vein. And the top two categories on that are non-custody bookings. So cite and release means that an officer, a law enforcement officer, encounters somebody in the field. They are issued an arrest ticket or a citation, and they're given a report date for a future court date. And they essentially put them under arrest and then release them to go to court right then and there on site. Those are cataloged in their records management systems. So each jurisdiction will have a total number of cite and releases that they've encountered. Many jurisdictions are also encountering people who have active warrants out of their municipality, but they don't meet the current booking restrictions, so they cannot book them into custody. And so they are reissuing the warrants, and they say, hey, go to court, and they issue them a future date for court. And both of those two things are kind of problematic in terms of being able to make sure that these people are processed through the system if they never actually make it to court, or something comes up and they just continually end up in warrant status. And so these two are kind of sustainable long-term. And if there were bed space available for them, they would otherwise be in custody. So there are two options that we're currently using fairly in a wide variety here in our community in lieu of bail. So when people are either booked into custody or before they ever come to custody, there are two types of pretrial monitoring systems that are in place. District Court Probation does pretrial monitoring for offenders who are from district court cases. And so they send all the people that the judges determine should be eligible to get transdermal alcohol detectors. They're essentially a blood alcohol monitoring system, or a portable breath test to carry with them, or they will put them on some form of monitoring, combination of those two, including but not limited to weekly or daily, depending on the need, urinalysis testing and reporting to probation. In addition, some jurisdictions are also contracting with a private company to perform GPS monitoring and other home detention type of functions, in addition to alcohol monitoring and detection systems as well. And then we have a variety of alternate sentencing options, including but not limited to mental health court, drug courts, work and school release, which is operated out of the work center. Electronic home detention is often abbreviated to EHD. So if you see EHD in some of our work, it's an abbreviation for electronic home detention. You might have also heard it is described as house arrest. So it's the same kind of thing where you're restricted to your home except for specific periods of time when you can go to the grocery store or work or school. We've got work crews in a variety of functions, both in custody work crew folks who spend their whole time at the work center. That's basically the primary residence, and then they go out to work with a work crew, and they provide a variety of civic functions for the community. And then we also have crews that are essentially the opposite, where they sleep at home and they live at home, and then they come to report to the work center for work for that day. That is the method that we also use for community service and fine reduction. So if a person is sentenced to go to community service, they can report to the work center. They can go and perform an 8-hour day of work at the work center in lieu of community service. And they also can get, I think it's $180 something per day as a reduction for their overall fines. Next slide, please. So the last section I'm going to talk about here are some of the things that Barry alluded to earlier, which are some concepts that we've been kicking around, and I think we introduced a little bit in terms of what are best practices for corrections today. And what we want to do, or at least consider in a proposed construction of a new facility, is think about these kinds of concepts. So prioritize versatility really means that we want to make sure that the space that we design can be used in a wide variety of applications. If we get too narrowly focused on one use case of a particular space, it can really limit the use that we can put it to. For example, if we made something a minimum security that only had the ability for minimum security offenders, and it was built with light construction concepts or very little robust nature to it, and then we had to put it to a different use later, it would limit our ability to use that piece or that unit. And so the more we prioritize making things as versatile as possible, the better off I think long-term we will be, and be able to use the flexibility of a space to change or modify the population and help kind of contain things in a way that's makes the most sense in a long-term way. So as populations of one type or another increase or decrease, we're able to change and adapt. In corrections, there are kind of two drivers for population that don't necessarily spring off the page. There's a population, their entire population of offenders who don't mix well with other populations. And that if we have a high volume of those people who either A, behaviorally, because of their charges, because of their different bents and issues, they can't be housed with other people. If we have a large population of those folks, we can't necessarily integrate them well into other populations. And so that drives things up. But if we also have an imbalance between male and female populations, and we don't intermix them in terms of co-ed, we don't do co-ed housing. So if we have a high volume of one versus the other, it makes it challenging to find space for everybody. And so if we make sure that we're prioritizing the versatility of a location, that will help. We really want to avoid dormitory style housing. There's two reasons for that. Number one, we found that over the years in this correctional setting, that dormitories provide for inexpensive housing. It's certainly less expensive to construct a dormitory than it is a more traditional cell. But what we don't see is long-term benefits of using a dormitory. So there's a couple of issues. Number one, if I'm in a dormitory, I'm right next to somebody and potentially right next to somebody else. We don't find the ability to have my own space, something that I can call my own, something that I can clean and keep the way I want it to be. Someplace I can regress to or go back to if I need to just some time alone. And we don't get that space in a dormitory. And then really what kind of put a really fine point on dormitory style housing was the advent of COVID. We've had zero, like no success of keeping COVID from spreading in our dormitories. It essentially just goes through a unit like wildfire, and you just sort of just hang on until it's gone. And with the work center being all dormitories and the larger number of dormitories downtown, we've just seen COVID coming through in waves and waves and waves with really no way of mitigating the spread. And so we've learned some valuable lessons, especially over the last 2 years in terms of having dormitory style housing. And then this key one, I mentioned it earlier, is bring the services to the inmates rather than the inmates to the services. It's necessarily more risky to bring inmates out of their housing unit. It is also more staff intensive. It takes more time and effort from a staff standpoint. So really in a design, we want to see that everything is brought to the inmates, be that rec, be that access to attorneys, video courts, wherever useful and applicable, counseling space, classroom space. I think I said rec, but rec stands for recreation. So I apologize for the short acronym there. And then, you know, as much as possible, co-locating as much service with the inmates. So they don't have to go somewhere to do their laundry. They don't have to go somewhere to get library access. They don't have to go somewhere to be visiting and things like that, which is exactly the opposite of both of our facilities at this point. We really want to honor the needs of the municipalities. I think that one of the things that's been going on over the past few years is we've had these booking restrictions is there's quite a bit of frustration on the municipalities front where we haven't been able to accommodate the requests. And we really, as a community, we owe it to them to provide space. That's one of the reasons that we exist, is provide space for the municipalities' jail needs, and we haven't been able to honor that. And then we really want to make sure that the technologies that we use in a proposed facility are as robust as possible, and they really can be used to leverage, the workforce so that you can gain some sort of advantage with, being able to monitor people over video or having recordings and audio recordings of what's going on, can help in investigations and managing populations. And we really don't experience that to a high degree today. And obviously, technology changes. I mean, I just mentioned that in 2013, we installed all new equipment in the downtown facility, and that wasn't even 10 years ago, and it's all obsolete. And so having the ability to modify, change, replace with relative ease technology as things grow and as the needs change over the years will also be an important aspect. I'm fairly certain that's the end of my discussion. I'm also certain somebody's going to have questions. So if that's the thing, then I'm happy to entertain questions. If it's not, then.
Thank you, Caleb. That was awesome. And I think what we're going to have to do is, if folks have questions, if they can just put them in the, this is always a mystery to me about how chat works on the county Zoom, but please send them to that email address that I posted up earlier, because I'm suspecting that if one person has a question, everybody's going to want to know the answer as well. So let's hold questions for now. And everybody, yay, Caleb, thank you for, that was really interesting. And gosh, especially that last slide, I just thought was really helped push us forward to thinking about what we're looking for. So a couple things, everybody, if you haven't yet done the renaming function, so there's a couple people who still are listed as SAC members. So remember, you just hit those little 3 dots at the top right of your square, and then you want to put in your name so you can be on the record. So if folks could take care of that, that would be great. And then I'm really pleased to introduce my colleague, Marty Solomon, who's been working with David on the inmate survey. And David wasn't able to come today, or I think maybe he's going to be popping in a bit later. But yeah, we're so excited to get to see the results of the survey. So Marty, are you ready?
I am.
Okay, it's all yours.
All right. And I do wish David was presenting his own work, but I will just highlight a few things. I know you all have gotten the full report in your packets. And so I just wanted to pull out a few points that are particularly relevant to the facilities discussion we're having here today. As you probably saw, we have 30% of the total jail population on the day that the survey was done. So 100 surveys were completed. And the folks who were not surveyed were people in the 23 and 1 housing units, and they are classified as much higher risk. That is the group that wasn't asked if they would like to participate. And the others, next slide, please. We who did complete the survey, we had 62% were at the work center and 38% were at the downtown jail. And they were offered the opportunity to fill out the survey and did that on their own and then returned it to David. The the differences between the work center and jail populations, I just want to highlight a few of those. One is that the sex offenders were at the work center, and the people in the mental health, the 10% there that you see under population who were in the mental health area, they were at the main jail. A few other differences between the two populations that I noticed on their responses are that the people who were at the main jail were a little bit more likely to have been homeless, living on the streets. They may have, they were a little bit more likely to be dealing with mental health and substance use disorders, and to have a longer criminal history and to have been incarcerated longer. than the people who were at the work center. And I think, Caleb can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think otherwise these populations are relatively similar. The people who are who are in the work center, by and large, have passed through the main jail and then are transferred. There's a lot of similarity between the two populations, more than there are differences. And looking at their responses to the survey, they were quite similar. And I will highlight differences where I noticed them. How about the next one? So this one, does our county need to build a new jail? 62% yes. And 20% no. And what I noticed is that the same percentage of inmates who were housed at the jail and the work center said yes. A higher percentage of work center inmates said no. That was 27% versus 8% who are housed at the main jail said no. So there's a difference there. Next slide, please. In terms of size, 69% said bigger. And so I didn't see a difference there between those who were housed at the main jail or the work center. That was consistent. Next slide, please. This one, I kind of love this chart here, because it's just showing the priorities and where, what people feel is really important. And so if you go to the far right, you see, not surprisingly, supported housing for people coming out of jail is just the highest priority for people. And I feel like that's just reinforcing what we've been hearing the whole time we've all been working on this. Supported housing for reentry. And then mental health services and substance use treatment in the jail and in the community. So the inmates are sharing what the same kind of perspective that we have been hearing as a consistent theme in our work. I want to just focus in on the middle two responses or items here. A brand new jail building is by far the lowest ranking in terms by inmates in terms of importance. However, the next item, a new jail building with spaces for rehab services, is ranked quite high, right up there with the other highest priority items. So that's I think this is a really important point, and certainly the direction that I think all of our conversations have been heading. Next slide, please. I'm going to just transition now into the facilities discussion part and highlight a few things from the facilities, from your survey, the one that SAC members took, about what you think about facilities. And this again was in your packet. I'm just pulled a few of the results to highlight today. So what I see here is that there is high consensus among this group, 77% feeling that we definitely believe that the downtown jail needs to be replaced, and another 10% probably. So that sounds very clear. Let's go to the next one. This one is about whether the work center needs to be replaced. And this is fascinating. We have a bell curve here with the highest percentage being unsure and equal percentages saying probably and probably not. So there is no clarity here about the work center. Now we're going to move into more conversation with you about 3 different factors when we're talking about facilities. We're going to talk about services, capacity, or the size of the facility, and location. And we'll go through each of these, but I'm just going to start each one with with one of our findings from the survey that you filled out, and then Holly will facilitate some, some open discussion about that. So we're going to start with services. How important is it that each of these services is located within a jail facility? And I just want to orient you to these charts. You've probably looked at them already, but just in case this is new to you, it is a complicated chart. It's the numbers that are going down the right side are a weighted average. And those numbers are relate to the scale that we asked you to fill out. If something was absolutely essential, you gave it a 5. And if it was not at all important, you gave it a 1. And the weighted average is taking into account that level of importance. So a score of 4.8 is close to 5. That is very close. It is almost absolutely essential. We would call it absolutely essential. And you can see the arrow on the right. I tried to just cue you about, where we were on that rating scale with each number. So the items that are considered really absolutely essential are medical services and mental health services. And then and options for visits with family and others. And as then we get below 4.5, we're in very important, what is very important to people. And you can read on down the row there. As we get to about 3.5, those are of average importance to people. And this is, across this whole group, what you all were feeling and responding to these questions. So Holly, I'm going to just turn it back over to you now to start off the discussion. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and flip to the next slide, Kathy, and these are some framing questions for our discussion. So remember, we're going to talk about services, capacity, which is also size, and then location. So the services questions are, what would you like the group to be thinking about as to why a particular service would be more or less important for co-location within a jail facility? So we've talked a lot about services in general, but this is really services related to facilities. And then the second aspect is, what more do you need to know before we make decisions? So for our group to be able to make good, clear recommendations, what other information do you think we need to know? So those are the two questions that we'd like to hear from folks on. And of course, we're always running into these challenges of having good discussions on Zoom with so many people. But I'll just remind you that the idea is we'd love to hear from as many folks as possible. We have about 10 minutes to talk about this one, and then I'll kind of summarize whatever comes out of the discussion. So the floor is open. Use your hand to be recognized to speak. And again, thinking about the way you're thinking, what would be helpful for the group to understand? Because of course we're going to have differences, right? But we want to help each other understand our point of view. So yeah, Arlene, you're first. Go ahead.
Hi. That was a wonderful presentation, and it's also wonderful that we had this survey. Oh my goodness, this was absolutely essential for us to be hearing from the people that we're deciding about here today. So thank you so much to David Goldman for initiating this and designing it and carrying it out. That was terrific. I wanted to say something about the work center. This is because many people don't know anything much about the work center. But because I worked in crisis triage for 9 years, which was co-located with the work center, I am very familiar with that building and its problems. And I can tell you that there are serious problems in that building. It is a pole building. It is not a decent structure. it had problems with air circulation. That is to say, people were constantly getting allergic reactions and breathing problems within that building. It was really terrible working there for those reasons. So, you know, in my opinion, it should be just rebuilt and co-located with all the other jail services. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Eileen. Okay, Michael, you're up.
Thanks. I would divide it. The questions I would want to have answers to are two sorts, the what and the where. The what is, do these services reduce recidivism? I think the answer is probably yes, but I'd like to be able to check that box and say, all these services reduce recidivism, therefore they need to be part of what's funded by the criminal justice system. The second thing is where services are located. I don't want it to be that there are better services or more appropriate services in jail, and therefore there's a motive or reason to keep people in jail so they can get the services they need. I think we heard that from, I think, one of the court commissioners, that they would love to be able to release someone from jail knowing that there were services available to them. So talking about what services we think ought to be in the jail, it seems to me we have to also talk about the same services or equivalent services available outside of jail, so that doesn't drive the decision about where the inmate is housed. Instead, we can release them or divert them based on other factors.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Cliff, you're up.
So I would like to know what it looks like to bring the services to the inmate as opposed to the inmate to the services.
Like, is more specific detail or the concept, just to make
Well,
to understand the basic?
So yeah, I guess the specific. So
Okay.
Do you take the inmate to the medical center in the jail, or do you take the medical to the inmate? The attorney, do you take the attorney to the inmate, or you take the inmate to the attorney? I'm trying to envision what that would look like.
Got it. Yeah, that feels like it would be helpful just to have a clarification. Caleb, would you be game to respond to that?
Absolutely, yeah. So Cliff, you're saying exactly right. Right now, in both of our facilities, if you need to see an attorney, you come out of a housing unit. If you're on third floor, you may come out of your housing unit, which includes 2 doors, go down a hall, down an elevator, down through another set of doors, and to visit with an attorney. It's inherently risky, especially if you have a higher classification or a higher security level inmate that you're transporting for that function. It's inherently risky. So rather than have all of those steps, have an attorney access point that's closer to the unit or in part as part of the unit that person is housed in, so that they can simply walk to a door inside their unit that has access to an attorney, either through video, secure conference video area, or through an on-site visiting space in the unit. Same thing for recreation areas. There's one recreation area in each facility, and if you have to go to recreation and you have to go out of 2 doors, down an elevator, through another door to get to recreation, and it takes 2 to 5 minutes to transport for that. And say you need 2 deputies to do that, it just takes more time and effort to transport for those kinds of functions. And you repeat that, medical, dental, anything that you need to do in a given circumstance needs to be brought to the inmates where they're at, rather than bringing the inmates to the services, unless there's an absolute need to. So say you don't want to reproduce a dental chair in every unit, potentially. Maybe you don't want to reproduce an x-ray machine in every unit. So unless you're getting an x-ray, you don't go to the infirmary. You go to the medical suite that's part of your unit. You just walk over to the medical suite and you see somebody for health checkup, and evaluation, that sort of thing. Again, counseling services, anything that you can reproduce at the location where the inmate is housed reduces the security risks, and it also reduces the staff time involved in moving people throughout the facility.
That's great. Thanks, Caleb. That was really clear. Cliff, did that help?
Yeah, I think so. I worked in the jail and I'm familiar with transporting people all around. I just want to know what the facility would look like if we didn't have to do that.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that'll be the next step, huh? Figuring all that out. All right, Dan, you're up.
Thanks. So there's some percentage of the inmates in jail that are awaiting competency restoration, and that is performed by West State Hospital. We had a conversation in a previous different setting with the public defender's office, and I see that Maya Lisa is on this call. I'm trying to get a perspective as a SAC member on whether or not we perform competency restoration services locally, whether that be in a jail facility or in another setting. I'm wondering if someone can respond to that.
Peter Frazier had the same question and sent me that question through Kathy this last week, and I responded to him. The statute for competency restoration for felony offenses requires that the person be sent to a facility that's governed by that is run by the department of. So I don't think by statute we can have a local facility do that. Although there is also in the statute a provision that allows for out of custody restoration, but it has a lot of requirements and our county doesn't have that yet. What I wrote to Peter and what I talked about the last time isn't really a replacement for the statutory process. It's something that maybe we could do locally. It's just that if we had folks receiving adequate mental health treatment in a therapeutic setting locally, they may be restored to competency just through that process, kind of as an independent thing, and not need to go to Western State Hospital. They could be diverted because someone can undergo a competency evaluation, be found incompetent, and then maybe voluntarily and begin medications and then become competent, and we can have a second evaluation happen. If that person's then competent after the second evaluation, then there's no need for them to go to Western. So it's more of like a backdoor kind of off the books, thinking outside the box way to try to give people the services, and it won't work for everyone because some people are not restorable. Some people require involuntary medication to be restored to competency. There's going to be some population that would have to go to Western. It's just, could we make that a smaller number of folks if we were providing adequate or more thorough services here locally? Let me know if I should talk about something else if I missed your question.
Dan, did that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, this is just a problem because people languish in our local jails across all the counties, and they just can't get into to get these restoration services. And I totally hear you, Maya, that some people just they have to do involuntary services. So this is just an issue that I'm trying to kind of whittle down the population that are pre-trial that are awaiting services. So yes, it mostly answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah. It almost sounds too like a design question of like, so what, and maybe not, just hold this as a question, which is what would it ideally look like? We have some base services, but for that very process that you all described for competency restoration, what would be a design solution? So maybe we just, noodle on that a little bit. Brel, you're up.
Thank you. So, I just want to first say that the slide earlier that said that 98% of people in the jail are pre-trial, that's shocking. I mean, that's a staggering number to me. And given that number, I think I would ask a different question. And I mentioned this on my survey, but I rather than asking the question of what services should be in a new facility, I think for me, a more important question is, what kind of services can we offer in a pre-trial setting that isn't in a facility, and that can, I mean, I understand that some people pose serious violent, threats of violence to our community, and that, that's an important thing to assess. And then, and as we were just talking about, there are people that need to be involuntarily committed. I love this idea about like having this mental health facility as a place for people to get well while waiting, competency hearing or whatever. But like, yeah, I think there's so many services that could happen in a pretrial setting that does not need to be under the context of incarceration. I think if we did that, we would see much lower numbers in our jail. And I think, and a question that I have that I feel like I need more information is like, I know that there is a consensus about building a new facility, but it'd be great to get more information about what's been explored. I know it's not a popular opinion, but given the scenario that a new facility couldn't be built, like what's been explored about renovating and retrofitting current facilities? Like have those numbers been crunched? What would that look like if a new facility wasn't possible? Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. Yeah. What's up, Paul?
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Just wanted to bring one point is that when we looked at the chart, if you see that a lot of people are there for less than 3 days or 5 days.
Mhm.
You remember that, but they are there. They have to be brought in for different reasons. So these services which we offer, we cannot offer to the population who are there for 1, 2, or 3 days. But the people, the biggest issue we are facing is the people who have gone through the determination or examination for mental health, but there is no place outside for us to send them.
Yeah.
There is a value to that. And I've been talking to all the county commissioners, executives, all the way from here to Snohomish County, that our communities need at least 500 beds outside of the jail for mental health. Like when we talk about when those things are not available, what do we do? And I think that this is not our preference to have all these services in the jail, but there's a necessity. And this is an equation which may take 10 years to reverse, that when we have adequate facilities outside, and that investment is not in our hands, is in hands of the state and other entities, we still have something to deal with, our own law and justice needs, and how do we fulfill those needs in a humane way. One of the more I just heard from Mr. Brell that repairing this jail. I have spent my 35 years in engineering and buildings and doing this thing. It comes up as a theoretical option. Have you looked at it? Or is it possible to repair this jail? Let me give you a quick answer. No, it's not possible. And this is not an opinion by me. This has been studied many different ways and many different things. I think let's not go there that we over the last 20 years have not explored this option, and maybe this is something new. This has been explored for many, many times. We already are spending our good money after bad money. It cringes me when I sign on a check or an order to put new doors, new new elevators, new this, new that. We have spent just in last 3-4 years about more than $10 million. So this is a black hole, and we could put $40 million and still won't have anything worthwhile to show for in this facility. I just wanted to say that it is not possible to do anything with this facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. All right, Brooke, you're up.
Thank you. My question was, if we did build a new facility with more space for services, what assurances would our community have that those service spaces wouldn't, a few years down the line, be transitioned into more beds?
Huh. That's interesting. It kind of connects to what Caleb was saying about the flexibility, right? Like, how do we make sure that we protect those functions if we actually build for that? Yeah, great question. Jack, how about for you?
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute.
Okay.
I wanted to, I know it's not typically useful to say I agree with so-and-so's point in a meeting like this, but Monday, I'm going to do it anyway. On Monday, I had the opportunity on behalf of our Stakeholder Advisory Committee to do a video of the jail that all of you will see shortly. Lieutenant Erickson was there. We had a camera crew, and we went through it in ways that I think very few people ever do. I mean, I don't think there's anywhere we really didn't go. And I was struck by the condition of that building. It reminds me, I had a nice Buick Enclave I really liked. And once it hit about 140,000 miles, I was spending $400 or $500 a month to keep it on the road. And I really believe putting more money into that building is just a black hole. I tend to be somewhat conservative. I'm a realtor. I certainly fiscally, I like to think I am. I don't want to waste money. However, I hope, while we may never gain consensus on what the county should replace it with, I do not believe that facility is a reasonable facility. And the sooner we quit pouring money into it, the better. And I hope we can at least get consensus on that, and then have the difficult and hopefully fruitful conversations of what path to take forward that would best serve the needs of the community. And it is a commercial for the video. We'll have that available, I think, in the next couple of weeks. So thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, we've got a promo on that later, so we'll just skip over that when we get to it. Okay, so other stuff about services. Go ahead, Teresa, you're up.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you to Caleb. Very informative. What I bring to the table, I'm newer to this committee, and I have some experience of seeing the inside of Los Angeles County when they built their brand new jail. I had the opportunity of bringing in the recovery message to those women in their pod facility, and I got to see them when they were brand new and saw how well that worked. And as a committee member, I would really like to see statistics on the savings of what we could save by moving inmates less. We talked a little bit about the cost of bringing inmates to services and services to inmates. And I saw a very big change in those days when the jail changed from services, when they used to move the inmates to the services, and then when they built the new jail in Los Angeles, the services were provided in that jail in those pods. And it was a very different world. And I would like, as a committee member, to see if we have those statistics on cost savings, because when we go out to vote, it's going to be about the money. People are going to want to see the money savings. That's all. Thanks.
Hey, Teresa, before you stop, would you just share with us, so as somebody who's seen that change, what did you see as being, pros or cons?
Oh, it was amazing. The pros were that for the people for the guards especially, they could see everything. They could see everyone. I think the security was fantastic. They had the ability through the cameras, the security, you could see all of the inmates in those pods all at the same time. I mean, it was incredible. This was, gosh, what year was that? 2000-ish, late 90s. Anyway, it was great. And it was brand new. And for the women in the inmates, they had the opportunity to have what felt like their own private, although it wasn't private, because they could see, the security could see inside, yet they felt like they had privacy. It was a really unique design. I'm sure you could Google it and see it, but it was great. It was a huge change from this old place called Sybil Brand, which was more of a dormitory type crazy place. But anyway, it worked really well, and I'm sure it still does to this day. Been a long time.
Thanks. That's really nice to have. Yeah, just your own experience there. Yeah, Barry, you're up.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind folks that there is a study done on the downtown facility. This is in regard to the question about remodeling, where they lay out a lot of the pros and cons of the downtown facility. We will make sure that you get a link to that. I believe it's on our SAC website, but we'll get a link out so you have an easy way to get to that. And you can look at what they came up with.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, Satpal. Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. When we talked about the word savings, it triggered something in my mind I wanted to share with all committee members. And this was even when we were in the council. I was in the council and this discussion was going on. Just the savings in the corrections deputies from the model we have now and the model we can have is substantial. If you look at the projections, I don't have those numbers in front of me from 2017, but it was something like average of $25 million a year on the corrections operation of the jail. And you do that over 30 years, that is $750 million in operating the jail for 30 years. That's the length of our bond is. And we can easily see a minimum of 10% savings in just that, which is very much possible. And that 10% is $75 million savings to our community, to our taxpayers. I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we should probably, for folks who haven't yet had a chance to speak, I want to give you a chance before we transition, but just to flag that really being able to demonstrate cost savings or, how these numbers are going to work out is important. It also feels like this whole issue about the competency restoration and a design for that. I don't know if some folks, for Dan and Lisa, have maybe giving some thought to that and what it might look like. That seems like it would be helpful. And some just great questions on, just information that both this group needs, but I'm imagining also the public is going to want to understand. And then the big question that I'm hearing about really just the capacity around mental health facilities and beds really that are not within the jail might be an important thing or is an important thing to really be thinking about. So any other comments here on the services before we move on? Okay, great. So capacity, here we go. Marty, do you want to give us an overview of the findings here on the capacity question?
Sure. So this is again is from the survey that all of you SAC members filled out about your facility priorities. And the most important to you is to have enough space in a new facility for all these services that we were just talking about that were on the previous list. And the second most important here, flexibility to repurpose spaces as jail population declines. I think this finding here echoes what Caleb was talking about with regard to versatility of space. And also when Brooke asked, what assurances would the community have that services, that spaces built into the new jail wouldn't just, for services wouldn't turn into beds for inmates? I actually was looking at this one as the flip side of that, where as you know, there's more services in the community, we would anticipate the jail population could decline and you could repurpose spaces in the jail for services as opposed to beds. So just versatility seems to be a theme today. I think it's a really important one. And this seems to be a high priority for all of you. The next two questions are related, and I think we were asking, you know, should it be big enough to accommodate more people as our population expands, or small with the possibility for future expansion? Definite preference for build it larger. I think that there was a concern, there has been a concern expressed in our community that if you build it too big, does it mean that you will feel an obligation to fill that space because you've now built it? And so there'll be more incarceration. And I think there's a balance to strike here between building it big enough to accommodate services, building it flexible enough to move, to be able to change as the needs in our community change. That's what I'm seeing reflected in these results from you, these responses from you. And don't build it too small.
Great. Thanks, Marty. That was great. Okay, so opening up the discussion then, talking about capacity. Actually, one more slide there, Kathy, if you could, please. And it would be great. It's really helpful to hear from everybody on your thinking. That's really going to help us shape what this, you know, really what we're recommending here. So what would you like the group to be thinking about when considering capacity? So what do you want others to understand about your thinking? And then same thing, what additional questions do we need to ask to determine the capacity of a facility? So capacity, size, how many people can be held there or be served there? Yeah, go ahead, Jack. And
I just want to quickly remind people of what I found to be one of the most compelling pieces of information in the Vera report, which said in their experience around the country, the most significant factor when determining the size of the jail are the policies that inform your local system, meaning the policies we have, who's incarcerated when, and what we do has a significant impact. So while history is very helpful and should be looked at, trying to make some educated guesses about what the policies will be with law enforcement, prosecutors, and courts is also very significant in determining the size of a jail. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Scott.
I guess I do what I sense with capacity is we're currently, I'll just say, boxed in by the building we have. And so as our county grows over the next 10, 20, 50 years, I don't want to be boxed in with this facility. So I want to have it, make sure that even if it is built to a capacity that we like today, And if we do great things and reduce jail population over time, but our population in the county still grows, we might need more room. And I don't want to have us stuck where we're at today that we can't build onto the current facility. So I want to have expansion opportunities for the long term.
Great, thanks. Yeah, Michael.
Thanks, Holly. I'm beginning to see this as two or more overlapping capacity problems. Looking at who's in the jail, you have the short-term inmates who are processed and in many cases are ideal candidates for, you know, home monitoring, etc. How many of those people are there, and what kind of facilities do we need to hold them shorter term before they're released in the appropriate situations, arraigned, bail, home monitoring, whatever. And then we have a separate capacity problem, which is the longer term inmates who are maybe there because of competency issues or there because they are serious offenders and not eligible for bail or held for other reasons pre-trial. And that seems like it's a separate capacity issue. And that I'd almost like to see those two capacity issues, and there's probably a blurry line in between for the people who are there for 9 days, right? But I want capacity for both of those. I want enough capacity and the right kind of connections that we can book in people who get in trouble with the law appropriately and then move them out because there's no reason for them to stay in jail. It's safer for them, better for the community, better for their return to crime or not return to crime if we move them out of the jail. But we need capacity to move them through. And then the separate capacity, who are the people who need to be held long-term? Who are the people who we might all feel safer, and they might be safer for the competency hearing if they were held long-term? So those are two different capacity questions. And then you add the two together. And it might also drive your facilities design because you might house them, those people, in different kinds of facilities, or at least not house them together.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, Dan.
So a couple of things. One, I think we need to look at active diversion programs that are already in place right now. The LEAD program, which is the other meeting that I'm supposed to be in right now that I'm not. It's law enforcement assisted diversion out of the prosecutor's office. Well, actually, that's out of the prosecutor's office. And the GRACE program, which is out of the response division of the Whatcom County Health Department. I think Erica Lautenbach might be on this call, and maybe she can speak to that a little bit. I want to understand the interplay between incarceration prevention and reduction when it comes to those two programs. And then the other kind of bigger looming thing is that the last time that the jail vote came before city council, I was the one that voted against it because the county was asking the city to essentially over subsidize the cost of the jail. And that has to be understood, I think, by this committee. It's not just Whatcom County that's the government of Whatcom County that's in play on this. They're also asking the municipalities, including Linden. I know that Scott's on this call, Mayor Cortez, to pay into this. And so that's a big question because that's the funding source of how this will then operate. It's not just the building of the jail, it's the ongoing operations. And so I want to understand what the interlocal agreement will look like with the city of Bellingham, what the expectations are, how many beds are we essentially buying, and what services are we paying for. So that's got to get entered into the discussion as well.
And to clarify, Dan, your comment about LEAD and GRACE, you're wondering about how much kind of how much capacity building could occur with those programs that would then affect the capacity needs of the jail. Is that what you're trying to dial in?
Yeah, so people keep talking about these diversion programs, and they just say diversion programs, but the ones that we have here, and we are ahead of the other 39 counties in Washington, well, of the 38 counties actually in Washington State, in creating diversion programs. GRACE has been with us for about 3 years. League's been around for, I think, a year and a half or so. And so we actually have diversion programs that are operating, and whether or not you agree with how they do it, they are essentially helping people to stay out of jail and to actually get services that they need, basic human services. And so if we were to expand those programs, what would that look like? How would that affect numbers in terms of people going into jail, knowing that there are folks that are criminogenic, that don't care about diversion services, that have no interest at all, or people who are severely addicted or whatever, in whatever level of addiction, who are then performing crimes in whatever capacity, and those diversion services may not ever work for those folks. So, but of the folks that they can work for, what does that look like? And if we expanded those programs, then could we predict a certain percentage decrease, or would there be no effect at all? And that's what I think needs to be talked about in capacity.
Got it. That made good sense. Okay. Check. And then Erica, if you do have comments on that, I'll give you a moment to jump in. But Kendra, you had your hand up a minute ago. Did you want to jump in?
Dan basically said my words. So thank you, Dan. I appreciate your time.
Okay, excellent. Brel, you're up. Or Dan, I'm sorry, you still have your hand up. Did you not finish? Did you have another?
Sorry, I'm doing this from a car and it's really hard to do this. So hold on. There we go.
Okay, good. All right, Brel, you're up.
Yeah, just building off of what Dan said, similarly, adding to the list mental health, expansion of mental health and drug court. Be interested to see if that would have any effect.
Yes. Great. Okay, thank you. Arlene.
It seems to me really important to include funding for the expansion of preventative programs and diversion programs, because they are working, because we have now proof that they are effective. And the way to think about it, I suppose, is that these are teams of support for people who are usually have co-occurring disorders of addiction and mental health. So they need to be followed, and they need teamwork to support them, and it does keep them out of jail. So to maintain the funding for those diversion sources is absolutely essential. Regarding the services required, all of them are important. I don't think we can say this one or that one is more or less important, because it's like a web of connections. And if you leave several out, then you're going to have those gaps constantly that people fall through. So the whole point of what we're doing here is to fill the gaps in our social service system. That's why we're here. That's why we're working. That's why we're talking about this, why we're struggling with it. And so this is our chance. Let's not drop things out that are needed.
Great, thank you. You spoke really eloquently too to that interplay between having services to keep people out of jail and then the cost of the jail, and how those two are interrelated, and how can we make that explicit or as explicit as possible, right? David, yeah.
I don't know if this was discussed when I wasn't here, so Holly, stop me if it was. And it kind of goes with what Arlene was saying, and I think as a community, I'm personally a terrible economist, and so I need numbers from somebody else. And I think really our community is in a big debate over that. I think our community can largely agree that there is some population of people who need to be physically separated from the rest for whatever reason, either because we don't have the capacity to deal with it in a better way, or they simply have to be for some reason. If we could have some idea of those numbers and how those numbers would grow with an increasing population, I think we could agree on a minimum capacity. And then there's the debate over, can we have the best treatment center in Whatcom County that the world has to offer? Can we have best? I mean, how good can we do how much is our community willing to spend on it? And have some, I think we need numbers, is what I'm trying to say. I think we can all agree there needs to be a certain group of people that will be incarcerated for whatever reason. And then past that, are we willing to invest more in X, Y, and Z in order to need less beds in a jail? But we need numbers. That's what I'm trying to say.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm hearing that. Yeah, Erica.
Thanks, Holly. I see Perry, my colleague, who's our behavioral health expert in the health department here too. So I hope that you add to anything I say. Both Lead and Grace are housed in the health department now. Those both transferred to the health department in March of this year. And I would be remiss if I didn't share a couple of things about those programs since they were both brought up. The first is there's pretty high thresholds for participation in the programs, given the model and given the capacity that we have at this point. So people have to have a lot of interactions with emergency services or law enforcement or the jail in order to meet those thresholds. So I think it's part of a continuum that's really, really important, but it's not the only factor that will reduce the jail population. In fact, many people have had a number of interactions with the jail before they become clients of these programs. And I think the second thing that I just want to share is even as we're talking.
I actually am going on a cruise on the.
Oh, I think Jack, you're unmuted.
Jack. Jack. Mute, Jack, mute. There you go. You got it.
Sounds like he's going on a cruise, so that's pretty good.
We're all excited for you too, Jack. That's so.
But the other thing I want to just share is that we have consistently cobbled together a variety of funding sources for these programs. And I just want to make sure that that's not lost in this conversation, that the funding sources we have currently are not as stable as we would like them to be. And I'm not saying that these programs are at risk of going away, but there's very little opportunity for us to expand given the tenuous nature of the funding. So I want to share that because if that is one of our solutions, we should also think about how we make sure that there's stable funding for those programs.
Thanks. I was wondering about that, Erica. Thank you for speaking to it. Okay, we are going to need to, it's 11:38, so we're going to need to shift gears pretty quick, talk about location, but I see 3 hands up. So Satpal, Brell, and Perry, go ahead.
I'll be very quick. I just want to remind everybody that the capital cost of this project and the running operation of this jail as such is our responsibility. Our community means Whatcom County responsibility. The gap in the social services and a programmatic cost of other programs we are talking, that is a shared responsibility with the state. So we should be very cognizant of that and that what we can achieve with our tax base and loading up on our citizens, how much and what we can accomplish with that. All those things are needed, but we must be careful about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Brell?
Definitely want to second what David's comment, and also just want to quickly add that looking at the jail survey, it's one of the results says that 63% of the people have been in jail longer because they are not able to pay bail. And, you know, I guess a curiosity that I have is how could numbers be lowered by eliminating bail or not having a bail system?
Great. Excellent. We'll flag that too. Yeah, Perry.
Yeah, I thought I would add a little bit to what Erica had shared, relative to the Lead and Grace program. The funding challenges obviously being tenuous. Mental health court is also part of the response systems division, and the concept and idea is, of course, working collaboratively and collectively within that division, and also, relative to the providers that are also a part of providing really important programs. But I thought that what I would do is share, just pulled some real quick statistics from a presentation that was done for Bellingham City Council, I believe, right at the end of 2021, that relative to lead, 58% less likely to be arrested after joining the lead program. And relative to grace, over a 1-year period, 179 individuals received some services from grace. 52% were connected to behavioral health services during that time. And people that were referred by law enforcement into grace had a 95% reduction in their involvement with law enforcement. So I realize that those are some really general numbers, but just to give people a sense, wanted to be able to bring a little bit of that presentation that was done for City Council.
That was great. Hey, also, folks, we have Jennifer Moon, who's helping actually write the report. It's here. So this is really good. I'm Jennifer. I'm just thinking, oh, this is good because people are really giving some, I think, important leads for what might be helpful to have in our report. So, gang, I think we need to move to our next topic, which is location. And so I just want to acknowledge we're hearing a lot about what do the dollars mean? Where are we going to put the money in and make sure that we're spending our dollars, our taxpayer dollars really wisely. So location, Marty, do you want to briefly go over this slide?
Yeah, sure. I think the first one, the first item that you thought was most important is proximity of a correctional facility to criminal legal system resources. And this is something that Stark Follis also stressed in the public defenders meeting that we had last week. And easily accessible by family and friends. And I relate that to the 1-2 down about proximity to public transportation. Those are all of in the very important, average importance are very important to you all. And finally, just going to mention proximity to crisis services as the last one that is very important. The things that were really of average or less importance were to have a facility be far from schools and far from high density residential areas. It's interesting. So let's discuss those items.
Okay, so yeah, Scott, go ahead, and then Barry, I was hoping you'd also kind of lay out some initial thoughts here. Go ahead.
I just have a quick question on the numbers because none of these hit the 4 category where it was very important before. So is it a relative scale then between these last 3 charts, or is it that we just deemed this 3rd point just less important than the other ones?
The scale is the same.
Yeah, I understand the scale is
yes.
the same, but
Yes.
these numbers didn't hit 4, so the others 2 surveys did. Yeah, so my question is, does that mean we all thought that location is way less important than size and services?
I think it means that you felt less strongly about these items than you did about the others.
Yep.
Okay.
So you're not comparing the main areas. You're just, when you think about location, these are the responses specific to location.
Right. But what I heard was that as a group, we think location is less of an issue than the other 2 because that's not true.
I wouldn't take it that way.
I wouldn't go that.
No. There is probably more, the way I would look at this is there's more variability probably in the group about how important you think these particular factors related to location are. Some of you just think they're less important, or you don't have as strong an opinion about these things as maybe, and you don't have as much consensus probably as the others, as services and capacity. That's how I look at it.
Thanks.
Great. Okay, Michael. And then we're going to focus on
more of an observation. So no secret, personally, I think the jail belongs in Bellingham, but there is almost no place in Bellingham that is far removed from schools. The school district works very hard to put schools everywhere, and our neighborhoods develop around those schools. And city works very hard to make sure that there's residential opportunities almost everywhere. So the only place you don't have that is Iron Gate. Otherwise, we work very hard to not create school-free, residence-free parts of the city.
Yeah, good point. So, and that's such a nice segue into really, I think where we want to focus in for this conversation, which is to really get practical about what our options are. And Barry, would you be willing to speak to the kind of where we literally sit on the land?
Yeah, I think, we've talked about over the years, basically these three locations you see on this slide. That was the downtown location, the Iron Gate area, and of course Ferndale, which was on the ballot. What we want to know from you is what more do you need to know about these locations? And the reason, other than just wanting to know, what we want to come back with on the 29th is some side by side comparisons of those three places to delve into a little bit more detail on them. So what we would like to get from you today is what questions do you have and need to know about the locations in order to be able to form an opinion to make a decision. So I guess that's our ask for this discussion period. So I will let Holly take it back over.
Great, thanks. So focusing on that, Michael, you still have your hand up, but did you have, okay, Dan, you're
Yeah, so I want to go back to that slide real quick. That slide is categorically false. That is not true. It's the jail.
Wait, slow down, Dan, slow down. I don't know which slide you're talking about at this moment. So can you?
Yeah, sorry, the three.
The three options for location.
The three options.
Okay,
Yeah.
so just jump into what other options do you think are available?
So I'm not going to talk about other options because that's not my point here. My point is that the first item says downtown. That is not correct. I'm in downtown right now. I'm on Cornwall Avenue. This is downtown. Where the jail facility currently is housed is in the Civic Center. So we need to stop saying downtown because that's not downtown. There aren't restaurants there. There aren't shops there. That is not downtown. It's a Civic Center, and that needs to be labeled correctly.
Okay.
I don't totally understand that. You're saying the jail that I'm like kitty corner from right now, you don't consider this downtown by the library?
No, that's absolutely not. It's the Civic Center. There's a separate component to the city center. There's the downtown commercial business center, and then there's the Civic Center. The Civic Center has, the closest, there's a restaurant just a little ways down from you, half a block from you. That really begins the downtown area. But
okay, that's a distinction that I don't know how many people on this call would ever make. I never would. I don't know what you're talking about.
So let's just,
let me clarify. Dan's correct. If you look at the way the neighborhoods are laid out and actually labeled on a City of Bellingham map, the downtown business district, which is what he's referring to, is certainly separate from the Civic Center. And I think we've held on to that nomenclature because it's been called the downtown jail forever in the reporting. So that's a kind of a semantical error. And I think Dan's correct. It really is the Civic Center.
Great, thanks. Dan, did you feel like you made your point?
Oh yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, Scott, you're up.
All right, so questions I have concerning the three options listed would be, if we don't use Ferndale, can we sell it? And how much money do we get for it? And is all that money going to be used to offset jail cost? Also, I would like to know if downtown is chosen, the Civic Center is chosen. I've heard the cost of that is going to be more because of land and space availability. So I'd like to know if there's a significant cost reduction or increase associated with any of the three sites that were listed, so that we have at least something to compare to in terms of money. And then the third thing I worry about the Civic location is expansion over time, because I have a feeling land is somewhat limited around there. So those are things I would like to know as we continue to move forward.
Great, thank you. Rel?
Yeah, kind of building on that, like, have any plots been identified downtown? Like, I'm just trying to imagine where there's even space in the civic center area. Like where is that? That's a question. And then also it seems like given the survey results of things that have been deemed important, then kind of rating the 3 places based on, you know, like how they score out based on what has been deemed most important might be helpful.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Peter.
I think I might be just repeating what Scott and Brel just said, but the Civic Center location concerns me. I think that we have to have just the best jail design when we do this, and I suspect that it's going to be more expensive and less flexible to build in the Civic Center because there's less footprint. But I don't know that, so that's what I'd really like to have an investigation into. Thank you.
Thanks. Arlene? Finding the mute button. Arlene, are you just looking for your unmute?
Sorry.
There you go. You got it.
I'm sorry. Regarding the preference of the Iron Gate location, having worked there are certain things I'd like to point out. One is there is a bus availability. It could be increased. It's not very frequent, but it's there. So that's really important for people being able to get there or to get to other appointments that they need. The other thing is that it's about 2 to 3 miles from the Civic Center, which is not a long distance at all. So I think that that's important because a lot of services are in downtown or Civic Center. It's in a semi-industrial area, so it's not immediately up against housing developments. I'm not sure about the school system, that I don't know, but you're not going to get blowback from the community saying you're too close to something.
Great, thanks. Great points. Yeah, Lisa.
Hi. Well, I have to say there's concern from the public defender's office about access to our clients, both us getting out there and having the time to do that, and having our clients have real and meaningful accessibility to in-person court appearances. And I mean, we just heard the jail saying that they don't even want to have to move inmates from where they're housed to an attorney visitation booth, you know, much less across town to come to court. And I think that we put ourselves in a position where we're going to become really reliant on video appearances, which I think is not the direction we should be going for these types of really critical hearings for people, and making it really difficult for the attorneys to access them. I don't know. I look around where I am right now and I'm like, there's this huge parking lot that's owned by the county, could be a underground parking lot and build a building on top of that. Is the library really happy where it is? Is that a space that, I mean, that's a large piece of property that I don't know. I don't know how much those things have been explored in the immediate vicinity, and maybe they've been completely ruled out, but I'd love to hear from someone about that.
Great, thanks. Gang, I am looking at how many people want to speak. I feel like I'd like to just offer that we could extend this meeting time just a few minutes so we can hear from everybody. Is that okay? Just a few minutes. I try to get you out of here on time, but let's keep going. Arby.
Yeah, as a practical matter concerning the Civic Center location, what impact will the construction have? Because obviously that's going to interrupt operations. And what is going to be the added cost to selecting that location? And is it even practical to do so?
Thank you. Great. David?
just as a stakeholding group that's supposed to come up with recommendations, I'm thinking in our community, we will want to address any social justice issues that we can at least come up with. I'm wondering if we have a voice from Lummi, from Nooksack, that would tell us if they are hoping this will be closer to the communities, farther from the communities. Just to have those voices included would be important. And if there's voices that aren't included right now that we hadn't received from, I hope that we'll do that before we bring something to the larger community.
Holly, I can interject a quick answer, partial answer to that anyway. David, we have invited both Nooksack and Lummi to join this group, and we haven't had participation at this point. But what we have done, part of our public engagement plan that we talked about earlier through the VITA agency, we really zeroed in on that population to make an extra effort. So there is something underway to get that what you're talking about.
Great, thanks. Okay, Wendy?
I just suggest that perhaps some of the studies that have been done previously as far as site location be made available to the members. The good or bad thing about me being around so long is that I've gone through this multiple times. So I'm more aware of what historical documents exist. Now, obviously, some of them would have to be updated as far as cost anticipation. Anybody who's bought a house in the past 10 years knows the difference in that. But it did address a lot of the things that people are concerned about. So that was just it. We've got a lot of documentation out there. Some of it's really boring, so fair warning, but it does have a lot of information in it. So
Great, thanks, Wendy. Yeah, we should make sure those are available. Get them up. Yeah, Dan.
A couple of things. One is that as it relates to Iron Gate area, the majority of Bellingham new housing is in North Bellingham, adjacent to that area. So that whole community, or that whole part of our community, will be developed. So thinking about Iron Gate as being in isolation, currently perhaps it is, but it won't be for sure over the next 20 years. And then the other piece is what Maya brought up about the parking lot across from her office. We've talked about that before for a number of different uses, including a jail. And I think that would be an appropriate place to consider.
Great, thank you. Okay, anybody else? Stephen, you had your hand up a bit ago. Did you want to jump in?
I was simply going to make points that were very similar to Maya's points. We've talked about the cost savings of bringing services to inmates in the jail and saving 2 to 5 minutes of staff cost. The cost of transporting from Iron Gate or Ferndale to the court system, which proximity to which was the most highly rated factor for location, tilts for me to looking hardest at the civic core location.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Cliff. Oh, you got your mute still on. There you go.
Okay, I'm just thinking, when we talk about this, are we considering the proximity to the other cities? You're talking about Bellingham, but you have Linden and Everson, Sumas, they have court as well, and you have to transport to them. So yeah, I guess I'm a proponent of the Ferndale location for numerous reasons, which I don't want to take time to discuss now, but maybe at some point we can do that.
Great, thanks, Cliff. Yeah, Kendra.
Hi, thank you. Well, I think I call it downtown. I've been here for 45 years, so I call it downtown jail. And so for the downtown jail, I also like the idea of the parking lot next door to it. My thought process was to build up on that parking lot, dig down with parking and have the building go up and have a sky bridge across to the old jail in downtown. So you can have access to that old jail for other items that are not incarceration purposes. Maybe there's different programs you can have for that. So you can maintain that building instead of having, I don't know if it's going to cost more to maintain the building as a useful facility or if it would be more cost efficient to tear that building down. But that's an option to have for your expanded space for your other programs with the Sky Bridge across. So you have complete transportation to go to the court system, and you won't have to be in an outside facility. It can just be a walkway. That's just my thought. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, Caleb?
I just wanted to clarify, sorry. The idea of reducing safety by having to move the inmates to the services is what I'm trying to capture. It's not simply a matter of being a cost savings. For example, we have people who are extremely volatile or dangerous. And when we have to take a staff member or 2 or 3 to move them from their cell location to a service, whatever that service might be, and they assault staff on the way, that is inherently a risky issue. And if we could mitigate that from a safety standpoint, that's really the crux of what I'm trying to get at in terms of co-locating services and inmates. It isn't simply a matter of saving cost. And I just wanted to clarify that. And then the other thing is I spent the whole presentation talking about downtown facility. I apologize to Dan, the Civic Center.
It's okay. I think we understand and appreciate that clarification. All right. Well, for folks, let's put this. Thank you all. That was excellent. Really some great thinking here today, and I really appreciate everybody's participation. So this I want to pop to see the second area there where you have the email. So if you have additional comments that you didn't feel like you got to share today out loud, if you can before the end of the day while it's still fresh in your mind, email them, because that'll really help us shape how we organize the 29th work session, as well as just help us thinking about what needs to go into our needs assessment. So please do utilize that. So we have the upcoming meetings, the facilities work session. We've got scheduled tentatively for September 29th. I just got a text from Marty saying an hour, seriously, something to that effect. Like there's just a lot to talk about, but we'll see what we can do. We also want to be respectful of everybody's time. And then make sure you've got on your calendar for the SAC meeting number 6, which is October 13th. Does anyone remember what the November date is off the top of your head, planning team? Because we should get that on folks' calendar as well.
I think it's the 17th.
Okay.
This is Kathy in the council office. It is on November 17th, and that is available on the SAC meetings and additional information page, and should have been sent out via Outlook calendar invite to all the members.
So everybody, yeah, thank you. Just make sure you get those on your calendar. Again, if you'd like to join that values, goals, and draft the vision statement with us, please email, by tomorrow if possible, so we can get that scheduled. And then don't forget, we've got all this content that Kathy has been putting up on the SAC information webpage, and it's super helpful to have all that. And some great ideas were offered today too on other things we might want to put up there. So that is it for today. Thank you all so much. Just excellent comments and really thoughtful, and so appreciate everybody's time. So hopefully we'll see you on the 29th, and otherwise have a terrific weekend.